The great chamber of the Interstellar Council was vast and shining, a hall built from stone and crystal older than most stars. It was a place where hundreds of voices once spoke as one, a place where decisions shaped the fate of entire worlds. On this day, the chamber was crowded with leaders from across the galaxy, each wearing robes of power, each face calm yet hiding a hunger for control. They had gathered to pass judgment on one small blue world. That world was Earth. At the center of the hall, the High Speaker rose. His long arms stretched wide, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The matter is decided," he said. "Earth is defenseless. They cannot protect themselves from the storms of war that rise among the stars." A wave of sound moved through the hall, a mixture of laughter, whispers, and agreement. Many species found the decision amusing. To them, humans were nothing but a primitive people, barely learning how to leave their own planet. Some called them children of fire and metal, playing with ships too small to matter. Others said humans were like insects, noisy and brave but easy to crush. In every corner of the chamber, there were nods and smiles. The declaration seemed final. Earth was weak. Earth was alone. But not every face shared in the laughter. In the shadow of the great pillars, a few council members sat still, their eyes dark and thoughtful. They did not laugh. They did not cheer. They stared at the High Speaker and then at each other, as if some truth sat heavy on their tongues but dared not escape. For in their hearts, they knew something the others did not. Yet silence ruled them, for silence was safer than truth. The High Speaker raised his hand once more, calling for quiet. "This council has observed Earth for many cycles," he declared. "We have seen their wars. We have seen their fragile ships break in the void. We have measured their weapons, their shields, their numbers. They are nothing compared to the great powers of this galaxy. If war comes, they will fall. If invasion comes, they will kneel. Therefore, let it be known, Earth is defenseless. They shall remain under watch but shall receive no aid." His words struck like a hammer, final and cold. The chamber filled again with voices, some proud, some mocking. One delegate, a scaled creature from a warlike species, hissed in delight. "Yes, let them stay weak. Better for us all. Better that humans remain in their cage." Another, with 1,000 glittering eyes, laughed and said, "They shout of freedom, but they have no claws. They will learn their place soon enough." The noise grew until the chamber shook with the sound of arrogance. Yet in the middle rose, a small, soft voice whispered to another. It was the voice of a young diplomat, a member of a peaceful race that had studied humanity more closely than most. He leaned to his elder and spoke words so quiet they were almost lost in the storm. "Defenseless? No. That is not the whole truth." The elder turned sharply and warned him, "Be silent. Do not let them hear you. Do you wish to be cast out?" Fear closed the young one's mouth, but his eyes burned with doubt. The declaration had been made, but not all were convinced. Some remembered things the council had hidden. Some had seen records not meant to be shared. And in those memories lay a story of humans that did not fit the word defenseless. But none of them dared to speak. Not yet. The High Speaker lowered his hands and ended the meeting with words that echoed heavy and final. "So it is declared. Let this truth be carried across the stars. Earth is defenseless. Let no one forget." The crystal walls glowed with the council's seal, sealing the judgment into the records of history. Across the hall, messengers rushed to spread the news to waiting ships. Already, the story of Earth's weakness was racing beyond the chamber, toward worlds eager for easy prey. But deep inside that hall, beneath the laughter and pride, the silence of a few told another tale. Their silence was not agreement. It was fear. For they knew something that others had chosen to bury. They knew that Earth had been tested many times. They knew that humans did not fall as easily as the council believed. They knew that when cornered, humans fought with a fire no logic could measure. And that knowledge, hidden and forbidden, burned heavier than the judgment just passed. The young diplomat sat in his place, his hands trembling, his eyes staring at the glowing seal of the council's decision. He thought of the humans he had studied, of their strange will to rise again after every disaster. He thought of the wars they had survived on their own world, wars so brutal that even advanced species could not imagine such survival. He thought of their strange way of laughing in the face of death, of fighting even when victory was impossible. He thought of these things, and the word defenseless felt like a lie. The hall emptied slowly, with delegates returning to their ships and their worlds. The laughter still rang, but under it lay whispers, faint and dangerous. Not all agreed with the judgment. Not all trusted the declaration. And some feared the consequences of declaring Earth weak when the truth was far more complex. As the last of the lights dimmed in the council chamber, the High Speaker stood alone at the center. His expression was calm, but his eyes were hard. He knew of the hidden reports. He knew of the whispers. Yet he also knew the council was built on control, and the truth of Earth was too dangerous. To admit it would mean fear spreading through the galaxy. To admit it would mean the council's power shaken. So he repeated the lie, even to himself. Earth is defenseless, he muttered. And that is how it must remain. Outside the chamber, ships lifted into the stars, carrying the judgment across the galaxy. But already, in quiet corners of distant worlds, the truth was stirring. And soon, that truth would break the council apart. The council chamber was empty now, but the air still carried the echo of voices and laughter. The decision had been sealed into history, a truth carved not by honesty but by power. Outside, the ships of countless species moved away, their engines glowing against the dark of space. Some left satisfied, some left amused, and some left with unease burning in their thoughts. In the shadow of the departing fleets, one young diplomat walked in silence, his mind heavy with doubt. He was from a gentle race known for their songs and their memory of old history. His name was Saran, and unlike many in the chamber, he had studied Earth not only through reports but through direct witness. His people had traded quietly with humans long before the council gave permission. He had seen their cities, their broken lands, their rising towers, their scars, and their stubborn will. He had watched them rebuild after storms, after wars, after disasters that would have ended many other worlds. And now he had listened to the council call them defenseless. The word felt poisonous on his tongue. Saran walked the long corridors of the station until he reached a private chamber where his mentor waited. The elder was called Vaynar, a respected voice in the council, old enough to know how dangerous truth could be. When Saran entered, Vaynar raised his eyes, slow and calm, as if he already knew what troubled the young one. "You spoke out of turn today," Vaynar said, his voice a quiet warning. "Your whisper was almost caught." Saran lowered his head but did not hide his trembling hands. "Elder, how can they call Earth defenseless? How can they lie so openly? I have seen what humans can do. They survive things no one else could." Vaynar sighed and rose to his feet, his robe dragging across the floor like a heavy chain. He walked to the wide glass window that showed the endless stars and the departing ships. "The council does not lie without reason," he said. "They shape truths to keep balance. If the galaxy believes Earth is weak, then Earth will be controlled. If the galaxy believes Earth is strong, then fear will spread, and fear breaks empires." Saran's voice rose despite the warning. "But, Elder, the fear is real. You know it. I know it. The humans are not weak. They fight with something more than weapons. They fight with a fire inside them. You saw the hidden reports as I did. You know what they survived against the predator race. Why must we pretend?" Vaynar turned sharply, his eyes narrow, his voice now cold. "Because to speak the truth is to invite ruin. Do you think the council does not fear humanity? Do you think they do not know? They know, Saran. They know too well. That is why they hide it. The galaxy must never be allowed to see Earth as it truly is. If they do, chaos will follow." Saran stepped back, shocked by the sharpness in his mentor's tone. But the elder's anger soon faded into sorrow. "Listen to me," Vaynar continued, softer now. I was there when the first reports came. I saw the files that showed how humans fought the predator kind, a species far stronger, far older, far more advanced. Humans should have been erased in days, yet they endured. They fought with no hope, yet they bled their enemy until the predators left in defeat. Do you understand what that means? The Council hid those files because they show a truth that cannot be measured in ships or weapons. Humanity fights beyond reason. That is power the galaxy does not know how to face. So we bury it. We bury it to protect order. Saran's heart pounded as the Elder's words sank deep. The truth was worse than he imagined. It was not ignorance that led the Council to call Earth defenseless. It was fear. It was control. A lie to keep balance. But balance built on lies could not last forever. Saran turned back to the window, watching the ships vanish into the dark. His voice shook, but he could not stay silent. Elder, the lie will not last. One day the truth will rise. One day the galaxy will see what humans are. And when that day comes, will the Council stand, or will it fall apart? Vaynar did not answer. His silence was heavier than words. The young diplomat knew then that his elder feared that day as much as he did. But fear had made Vaynar cautious, while fear made Saran restless. Saran wanted to speak, to tell others, to break the silence. Yet he knew what would happen if he did. The Council would strip him of his place, maybe even his life. The Council protected its lies with quiet hands but sharp claws. Still, the truth pressed against his chest, aching to be spoken. That night, while the station drifted above a silent world, Saran walked again through the empty halls. He passed the great chamber where the declaration had been made, now dark and quiet, its crystal walls glowing faintly in the starlight. He stopped and placed his hand on the cold surface. He thought of Earth, of humans walking their crowded streets, unaware that across the stars their fate was being written in lies. He thought of their laughter, their anger, their endless will to rise again. And he whispered into the silence, words only the walls could hear. You are not defenseless. One day they will see. One day they will fear what they tried to hide. But Saran was not alone. From the shadows of the chamber, another figure stepped forward. A tall, armored delegate from a warlike race, his eyes sharp, his mouth curved in a cruel smile. Interesting words for one so young, the figure said, his voice low and heavy. Saran froze, his blood cold. He had not sensed anyone else in the hall. I heard your whisper in the Council today, the figure continued. And now I hear it again. You doubt the declaration. You doubt the Council. Perhaps you know something the others do not. Saran tried to speak, but his throat was dry. The armored delegate moved closer, his footsteps echoing. Be careful, little diplomat, he said. The truth is a dangerous thing. Dangerous for Earth. Dangerous for you. With those words, the figure turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Saran shaking in the silence. He knew now that he had been noticed, and that the truth he carried was no longer safe. The Council had declared Earth defenseless, but whispers had begun. Whispers that could not be stopped. Whispers that would soon grow into storms. And somewhere across the stars, humanity lived their lives unaware that their strength, their spirit, was the secret tearing the Council apart. Far from the shining chambers of the Interstellar Council, far from the lies written in crystal, the story of Earth was still alive in hidden records and fading memories. It was not a story of weakness, but of survival. And survival was a language humans spoke better than any other. Deep inside the archives of the Council, files were locked away, their access forbidden, their truth buried under silence. Only a few had read them, and fewer still dared to remember. Among those memories was the war with the predator race, a war so brutal that many species believed no young world could have endured it. The predators were old, their claws sharp, their fleets vast, their weapons forged from centuries of conquest. They had crushed worlds without mercy, turning proud civilizations into ashes. To them, Earth was a new prize, a fresh world with oceans and life, a place to claim as they had claimed so many before. They came with fire, their ships blotting out the skies, their voices carrying promises of fear. They told the humans to kneel, and then they waited for surrender. But humans did not kneel. The first battles were chaos. Human ships were small, their weapons crude compared to the predator fleets. Cities burned. Oceans turned black with smoke. The predators laughed at the resistance, for they had seen many weaker species fight before falling. Yet something unsettled them. The humans did not break. Every loss seemed to harden them. Every death seemed to fuel their anger. Villages destroyed became symbols of vengeance. Cities lost became reasons to strike harder. Where other species ran, humans dug trenches. Where others begged for mercy, humans sharpened their blades. One report told of a small human colony, cut off from the rest of their world. Surrounded by predator soldiers, the humans fought with everything they had. When their weapons failed, they fought with stones and fire. When fire was gone, they fought with their bare hands. Not one of them surrendered. The predators wiped them out, but the battle was remembered. One soldier wrote in his dying breath, scratched into the wall of a ruined shelter, "We do not stop. We do not bend. We fight until the end." That sentence, hidden in a forgotten archive, sent shivers through the few council members who ever read it. Weeks turned into months, and the war dragged on. By every logical measure, Earth should have fallen. But logic did not rule humans. They fought in ways the predators did not expect. They turned their small ships into weapons, ramming enemy cruisers with suicidal courage. They used terrain, weather, and even their own ruined cities as traps. They poisoned rivers, collapsed tunnels, set entire forests ablaze to stop advancing forces. No strategy was too desperate, no sacrifice too great. The predators, who believed themselves invincible, began to bleed. The Council's secret files spoke of one battle in particular, a battle above Earth's largest ocean. A predator fleet of overwhelming size moved to crush the last human defenders. Outnumbered 10-1, the humans should have been destroyed. But they refused to fight as the predators expected. Instead of standing in neat lines, they scattered, striking like swarms of insects. Small ships darted between giant cruisers, striking weak points, forcing the predators to chase them. Hours turned into days, and every human loss bought more time. In the end, when their ammunition was gone, the humans rammed their ships into predator flagships, tearing holes through armor with their own dying hands. The predators won the battle, but the cost was staggering. For every human ship destroyed, 2 predator ships fell with it. For every human life lost, a predator commander paid a heavy price. Victory had become poison. The predator race, proud and merciless, began to see something they had never seen before. Fear. Not fear of human weapons, for those were weak, but fear of human will. Fear of an enemy that did not surrender, that did not despair, that turned every wound into rage. The predators left Earth in the end, not because they could not win, but because they realized victory was hollow. They could take cities, but they could not take the human spirit. To conquer Earth would mean endless war, endless resistance, endless blood. And so they retreated, broken not by weapons, but by the fire in human hearts. This truth was written in reports, carried by scouts, recorded by machines. But when the files reached the Council, they were locked away. The Council read them and understood the danger. If the galaxy knew, the balance of power would collapse. Other species would look at humans not as weak, but as terrifying. So the Council buried the story. They declared Earth defenseless, while hiding proof of the opposite. They lied to protect their rule. They lied because the truth was more dangerous than any weapon. In hidden corners of the station, Saran read one of those reports late into the night. His mentor had shown it to him once, long ago, before warning him never to speak of it. But the words burned in his mind, refusing to die. He read about soldiers who fought with empty hands, about mothers who carried weapons when soldiers had fallen, about children who refused to hide and threw stones at armored giants. He read about a world that would rather burn than kneel. And as he read, His heart trembled with both fear and admiration. Humans were not like other species. They were something different. Something dangerous. He closed the report, his eyes heavy but his mind awake. The council's judgment echoed in his memory. Earth is defenseless. Yet the words felt weaker than the whispers of truth he now carried. He thought of the predators who had left Earth in shame, of the humans who had fought with madness and courage, of the scars still carved into their world. Defenseless? No. Earth was not defenseless. Earth was waiting. Saran knew then that the lie could not hold forever. Too many whispers, too many hidden truths, too many memories like this one. The galaxy would learn what humans were, sooner or later. And when that day came, the council would not be able to control it. The truth was rising, like fire under stone, ready to break free. The flashbacks of survival were not just history. They were warnings. Warnings that the galaxy had laughed at Earth for too long. Warnings that the council's fear was real. Warnings that humanity was not weak, but unbroken. And unbroken enemies are the most dangerous of all. The council had locked the truth inside vaults of crystal and code, but secrets have a way of breathing even when buried. Hidden in the deepest archives, far from public eyes, the secret reports about Earth waited in silence. They were files the council feared, records of battles they swore never to mention, stories that showed not weakness but a strength that frightened even the most powerful empires. Saran had touched one of these reports before, but he knew there were more. Many more. And each one carried a truth heavy enough to shatter the council's lies. On the fourth night after the council's declaration, Saran walked the long metallic corridors of the station until he reached a sealed chamber guarded by silent machines. His heart pounded as he placed a stolen passstone against the lock. The door hissed open, and the cold air of the archive washed over him like the breath of ghosts. Rows of crystal tablets glowed faintly, each one a piece of history the council had tried to erase. He stepped inside, every step echoing against the floor, his hands shaking with both fear and determination. Saran reached for one of the crystals, its surface humming softly, alive with memory. He pressed his palm to it, and the vision opened before his eyes. He saw fire, war, oceans of smoke. He saw predator fleets burning in the skies above Earth. He saw human soldiers screaming their defiance even as they fell. And then he saw words, cold and sharp, written by an observer who had survived the war. If humans are weak, the word said, then weakness is the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. Saran pulled his hand back, trembling. He turned to another crystal, then another. Each report told the same story. Humans refusing to surrender, humans fighting with madness, humans standing when no one else would. One report spoke of a single human ship facing a predator cruiser. Outgunned, outmatched, the humans launched every weapon they had until nothing remained. When their guns fell silent, they rammed their small ship into the cruiser's engines. Both ships were destroyed. The observer wrote, "They died, but they took their enemy with them. They fight as if death is not an end but a tool." Saran swallowed hard, his chest tight. The council had buried this because it was not just proof of human survival. It was proof of human danger. If the galaxy saw these reports, fear would spread faster than fire. In the silence of the archive, Saran whispered to himself, "This is the truth they fear." His voice trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of what he now carried. He thought of his elder Vaynar's warning. To speak the truth was to invite ruin. Yet as he stood in the glow of forbidden history, Saran knew silence was its own kind of ruin. For every lie the council told, the truth only grew heavier. And one day, it would crush them. Saran copied fragments into his private memory stone, careful to hide his work from the watching machines. He knew it was dangerous, but he could not leave empty-handed. The galaxy deserved to know what had been buried. But he was not alone in the archive. As Saran turned to leave, a shadow moved between the rows. A tall figure stepped into the faint light, armored and cold. It was the same delegate who had confronted him in the council chamber, the warlike alien with eyes like steel. His voice cut through the silence. I wondered how long it would take before you came here. Saran froze, clutching the memory stone tight against his chest. You should not be here, the figure continued. These reports are forbidden. To touch them is to betray the council. Do you wish to be cast out, little diplomat? Or perhaps destroyed? Saran forced his voice to steady. Why hide the truth? Why bury what humanity has done? Is the council so afraid of them? The armored figure stepped closer, his smile cruel. Afraid? Yes. We fear what cannot be controlled. Humans are not like others. They do not bend. They do not break. They are a storm that refuses to end. And storms are dangerous to empires like ours. That is why the truth must remain buried. Saran's heart raced, but his voice grew stronger. One day the truth will rise. You cannot bury it forever. The figure's eyes narrowed. Perhaps. But when it rises, it will bring blood. The council will burn, the galaxy will tremble, and humanity will stand at the center of the fire. Do you think that is something to welcome? Saran had no answer. The thought of a galaxy in chaos, of war spreading like disease, was terrifying. Yet the thought of humanity kept in chains of lies was worse. The armored figure leaned close, his voice now a whisper. Take care, young one. Secrets have teeth. And those who carry them often do not live long. Then he turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Saran shaking in the silence of the archive. Saran hurried back to his chamber, his mind a storm. He replayed the reports in his head, the images of fire and defiance, the words carved by dying hands. He felt both fear and admiration, dread and hope. Humans were dangerous, yes, but they were also proof of something greater. Proof that survival was more than weapons or fleets. Proof that spirit could break empires. He sat alone in the dark, clutching the memory stone, and whispered to himself, They are not defenseless. They never were. Far above the station, the council's words echoed through the stars, spreading lies of weakness. But now, in Saran's hands, the truth burned like a hidden flame. A flame that could not stay hidden forever. And somewhere across the galaxy, on a small blue world called Earth, humanity lived unaware of the storm building in the council's heart. A storm that would soon break the galaxy apart. The council chamber was never truly silent. Even when the great meetings ended and the crystal walls dimmed, whispers moved through the air like restless ghosts. Whispers of fear, of doubt, of secrets too heavy to stay buried. After the declaration that Earth was defenseless, the laughter of the strong had filled the chamber. But in the days that followed, the sound had begun to change. It was no longer only laughter. It was argument, suspicion, quiet rebellion. The lie was beginning to crack. When the council gathered again, the chamber was filled with tension sharp enough to cut. The high speaker sat tall at the center, his eyes cold, his voice steady as he repeated the judgment. Earth is defenseless. This matter is closed. But even before his words had finished echoing, voices rose in defiance. From one corner, a slender figure with silver skin and deep, piercing eyes stood. She was a representative of the Chiron, a people who valued truth above all else. Her voice rang clear through the hall. Closed? Nothing is closed while lies still rule this chamber. You say Earth is weak, yet reports exist that tell another story. Do you think we do not know? Do you think we have not heard the whispers of the Predator War? A wave of murmurs spread through the crowd. The high speaker's expression tightened, but he said nothing. Then another voice rose, this one deep and heavy, belonging to a reptilian warlord whose kind had fought beside predators long ago. I have seen the reports, he growled. I have read of human madness, of their refusal to die. If this council declares them defenseless, then the council is blind. His words echoed like thunder, shaking the chamber. But just as quickly, voices rose in opposition. A tall delegate of the Trellith, a species who had always sought to control weaker worlds, stood with his cloak flowing like shadow. Blind? No, we see clearly. Humans are dangerous, yes, but that is why they must be declared weak. To admit their strength is to unleash fear across the galaxy. Do you wish to see chaos? Do you wish to see empires crumble because one small world refuses to bow? His voice grew sharp, and many nodded in agreement. The lie is not a lie. It is protection. Protection for us all. The chamber erupted into shouting. Some demanded truth, others demanded silence. Some cried for alliance with Earth, others for suppression. The once united council now trembled with division. Saran sat among them, his hands clenched, his heart pounding. He wanted to rise, to speak the truth he had seen with his own eyes, but fear chained his tongue. He remembered the warning of his mentor, the threats of the armored delegate, the danger of carrying secrets. Yet, as the voices grew louder, as the council began to tear itself apart, Saran felt the weight of silence pressing harder than ever before. One delegate, a frail scholar with wings folded tight against his back, raised his trembling hands. "Do you not see what is happening?" he cried. "It is not Earth that divides us, it is our fear of them. We fear what they might become, and that fear has already begun to destroy us. If the council cannot face the truth, then perhaps the council deserves to fall." Gasps filled the hall, for never had such words been spoken openly. The High Speaker rose, his voice sharp as a blade. "Enough. You speak treason. This council has stood for 1,000 years, and it will not fall because of one primitive world. Earth is nothing. Earth is defenseless. And anyone who says otherwise stands against order itself." His words carried power, but the sound of rebellion could not be silenced. Too many voices had already broken free. The chamber shook with anger, fear, and division. Delegates pointed at one another, old rivalries surfacing, old wounds reopened. Some accused others of hiding truths. Some accused others of cowardice. The council was no longer a single voice but a storm of clashing wills. Saran watched as the mighty empire that claimed to rule the stars revealed its weakness. Not weakness of weapons or fleets, but weakness of trust. Weakness of unity. All because of Earth. As the argument raged, Saran's eyes drifted to the High Speaker. The leader's face was calm, but his hands gripped the edge of the crystal table so tightly that cracks spread beneath his fingers. He knew the lie was breaking. He knew the council was fracturing. Yet he would not yield. For if he admitted the truth, the council's power would collapse in a single breath. And so he clung to the lie, even as it tore the chamber apart. Outside the hall, the whispers grew louder. Messengers carried rumors to distant worlds. Traders whispered of human defiance in hidden markets. Soldiers spoke of human battles in secret barracks. The truth was spreading, not through official words but through quiet voices. And those voices were becoming a rebellion of their own. Inside the chamber, the storm reached its peak. Delegates shouted over one another, their voices echoing like thunder in the great hall. Some demanded Earth's destruction before their strength could grow. Others demanded alliance before it was too late. Still others demanded the council itself be reformed, cleansed of lies. The council that had once spoken with one voice was now a battlefield of words. And in the center of it all, the name of Earth burned like fire. Saran lowered his eyes, his mind racing. He knew the truth was no longer safe in the shadows. It was rising, alive in the mouths of those who dared to speak. He thought of the reports hidden in his memory stone, of the words written by dying humans, of the images of defiance burned into history. He thought of his elder's warning, of the armored delegate's threat, of the danger he now carried. But he also thought of Earth, of the humans who did not know they were the center of a storm greater than themselves. He thought of their laughter, their stubborn will, their fire. And he whispered in his heart, "They will not stay silent forever. Neither will I." The session ended in chaos, the High Speaker slamming his hand against the crystal table, declaring the meeting adjourned. But no order returned. Delegates left shouting, their alliances broken, their tempers sharp. For the first time in centuries, the council had no unity. For the first time in centuries, fear had broken their walls. And the cause was not an empire, not an army, not a weapon. It was a single world the council had declared defenseless. A world whose truth was now tearing them apart. The council chamber was restless. Weeks had passed since the declaration of Earth's weakness, yet the voices of rebellion had not been silenced. Every session ended in shouting, every debate ended in division, and the High Speaker's command grew weaker with each passing day. The name of Earth echoed through the halls like a storm, a single word powerful enough to fracture an empire built over centuries. Rumors spread faster than ships, whispers of secret reports and forbidden battles carried across the stars by traders, smugglers, and wandering diplomats. And then came the day when the council could no longer hide behind silence. For the first time in history, a human stood in the great hall. The chamber was filled to the brim, every seat taken, every delegate leaning forward, their eyes fixed on the figure walking slowly toward the center. The human ambassador was not tall compared to many of the creatures in the room, nor was he dressed in robes of gold or silver. He wore only a plain suit, dark and simple, with the emblem of Earth on his chest. His face was calm, his steps steady, but there was something in his eyes that made even the boldest delegates hesitate. It was not pride, nor arrogance. It was a quiet fire, a weight of survival carried in silence. The High Speaker's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. You stand before the Council of the Galaxy. Speak, human. Speak, and know your place. The human lifted his head, his gaze sweeping across the vast chamber. His voice, when it came, was steady and clear, carrying without the aid of machines. You call us weak. You call us defenseless. But I ask you, what do you know of us? Have you walked our ruined lands? Have you seen our broken cities rebuilt from dust? Have you felt what it means to starve and still rise, to bleed and still fight, to die and still be remembered? The hall fell into silence, the voices of 1,000 species caught by words spoken in simple truth. The human took another step forward, his eyes fixed on the High Speaker. You say we cannot survive the storms of war. Yet we have lived through storms your kind cannot imagine. We have fought each other in wars so brutal they left scars on the earth itself. We have faced disasters from nature, from hunger, from fire, from disease. And we are still here. Still standing. Still breathing. Murmurs began to stir among the delegates, but none dared interrupt. The human's voice carried too much weight, a weight that did not come from power but from survival. He lifted his hand, his words sharp now. You laugh at our ships. You call them small. But every time they fall, we build them again. You mock our weapons. You call them weak. But in our hands, even weakness can kill. You call us primitive, yet with bare hands and broken tools we have done what others thought impossible. We endure. We adapt. We overcome. His gaze turned to the rows of delegates, and his voice grew softer, yet somehow stronger. Tell me, how many of you can say the same? How many of your empires would rise again after being burned to the ground? How many of your people would fight when victory is gone? How many would stand, not for power, not for glory, but simply to live free? The chamber was silent. Delegates shifted uneasily in their seats, eyes darting, hearts heavy. Some lowered their heads in shame, others clenched their fists in anger, but none could deny the truth they had just heard. The High Speaker rose, his voice sharp, trying to break the silence. You speak boldly, human. But bold words do not make strength. This council has judged, and Earth is defenseless. The human turned to him, calm but unyielding. Defenseless? Then tell me, why does the council fear us so much that they bury our history? Why do they hide the war with the predators? Why do they lock away the truth of our survival? If we are nothing, why lie? If we are weak, why fear? A wave of shock moved through the chamber. The words had been spoken openly now, the forbidden truth revealed before the entire council. Delegates gasped, voices rose, the chamber filled with chaos. Some shouted for silence, others demanded answers, but the human ambassador stood unmoved, his eyes steady. He had not brought weapons, he had not brought fleets. yet his words had struck harder than any cannon. He had spoken the truth the council feared most, and now it could not be unsaid. The High Speaker's face darkened, his hand slamming against the crystal table. "Silence!" he roared. But his command carried less power than before. Too many minds had already begun to shift. Too many eyes had already seen through the lie. A delegate from the Chiron rose, her voice clear. "The human speaks truth. We have seen fragments of the reports. We know the council hides them. We know Earth has survived what others could not." Another rose, the reptilian warlord, his growl deep and filled with anger. "If they are defenseless, why do I feel fear in my bones when I hear of their battles? Why do I see strength where the council tells me there is none?" The chamber erupted again, but this time it was not the same as before. This time the human's presence gave weight to every word. Rebellion was no longer a whisper. It was alive, growing louder with every heartbeat. Saran sat frozen in his seat, his chest burning with pride and fear. He had dreamed of this moment, of truth spoken in the council's heart, yet to see it with his own eyes filled him with awe. The human ambassador had done more in a few minutes than Saran had ever dared in his whispers. He had cracked the lie open for all to see. The High Speaker tried to restore order, his voice rising above the storm, but his authority slipped like sand through his fingers. The council was no longer united. The lie was no longer safe. And the human ambassador, with nothing but words, had set the fire alight. As the meeting ended in chaos, the human turned without bowing, without fear. He walked out of the chamber slowly, every step echoing against the crystal walls. He had not shouted. He had not threatened. He had simply spoken. And yet his words lingered, heavy and unshakable. The delegates stared after him, their thoughts torn, their fears awakened. For the first time, Earth's voice had been heard in the heart of the galaxy. For the first time, the council was forced to look into human eyes and see not weakness, but fire. And deep inside, where fear and respect are born together, they knew the truth could no longer be buried. The witness had spoken, and nothing would ever be the same again. The council had always believed itself unshakable. For centuries its voice had ruled the stars, its laws unchallenged, its power unquestioned. But now, after the human ambassador's speech, the foundation of that power trembled. The chamber was no longer a hall of order but a battlefield of words. Delegates who had once bowed in silence now shouted in fury. Some demanded Earth be destroyed before their strength could rise further, while others demanded alliance before war consumed them all. The High Speaker tried to control the chaos, but his commands fell into noise. The authority he had carried for generations was slipping away, and everyone in the chamber could feel it. Saran sat among the storm of voices, his chest heavy, his thoughts racing. He could see the cracks spreading not only through the council but through the galaxy itself. If unity broke here, then war would follow. And all because of Earth. But perhaps, Saran thought, it was not because of Earth alone. It was because the council had built its throne on lies, and lies could not stand forever. The human had spoken truth, and truth had a power no weapon could silence. The chamber grew hotter with anger as accusations filled the air. Delegates pointed at one another, some calling out betrayal, others accusing rivals of conspiring with Earth. Old wounds between species opened like fresh scars, and centuries of hidden grudges surfaced. A delegate from the Valor stood and shouted that his people would no longer follow a council built on falsehood. A warrior of the dreadnoughts roared that if humans were not weak, then they must be crushed before they became a threat. The Chiron representative stood tall, her silver skin shining, declaring that her people would no longer hide the truth. Her words spread like fire, and suddenly others rose beside her, voices joining in defiance. Saran felt the weight of history unfolding before him. The galaxy was shifting, and the council was breaking. The High Speaker slammed his hand against the crystal table, cracks spreading through its surface. His voice boomed across the chamber, filled with rage. "Enough! You will not tear apart centuries of peace because of one world. Earth is nothing. Earth is weak. This council will not fall. But even as he spoke, his words rang hollow. Delegates who once feared him now looked at him with suspicion. They had seen his fear when the human spoke, seen the cracks in his power. They no longer believed. And when belief dies, so does authority. In that moment, Saran realized something terrible. The council was no longer debating Earth. It was debating itself. Earth was the spark, but the fire now consumed everything. If the council fell, empires would rise against one another, alliances would shatter, and the galaxy would bleed. Saran's heart pounded. He wanted to rise, to speak, to plead for reason, but his voice felt small compared to the storm around him. And yet he knew silence was no longer safe. The human had spoken with courage. Could he do less? Before Saran could move, the chamber erupted in chaos. A delegate from the Dreadnoughts leapt to his feet, roaring that the humans must be destroyed, his fists slamming against the table. The Chiron representative shouted back, her voice filled with fury, declaring that the council had no right to judge a world it did not understand. The reptilian warlord slammed his tail against the ground, demanding silence, but the noise only grew. In the shadows, Saran saw the armored delegate, his eyes burning like fire, his hand resting on the hilt of a weapon hidden beneath his cloak. Fear shot through Saran's chest. If blood was spilled here, the council would never recover. The High Speaker raised his arms, his voice sharp as thunder. If you will not obey, then you will be crushed. His words sent a shock through the chamber, but instead of restoring order, they ignited rebellion. Delegates rose from their seats, shouting, some even drawing weapons. Guards rushed forward, their armor gleaming, their weapons raised, but the storm was already too strong. The council was breaking, not tomorrow, not in secret, but here now, before Saran's very eyes. And in the heart of the storm, Saran finally stood. His voice was not loud, yet somehow it carried through the chamber, cutting through the noise. "Stop!" he cried. The delegates froze for a heartbeat, their eyes turning toward him. His body trembled, but his voice grew stronger. "You fight because of fear. You fight because you cannot face the truth. But hear me, the truth is not your enemy. The truth is your only chance to survive." Silence spread slowly, heavy and uncertain. Saran swallowed hard, forcing himself to continue. You fear Earth because they remind you of what you have forgotten. You fear them because they endure. You fear them because they do not bow. But instead of crushing them, learn from them. Instead of lies, face the truth. Only then will this council survive. For a moment, hope flickered in the air. Some nodded slowly, their anger fading, their eyes heavy with thought. But others hissed in rage, their pride unwilling to bend. The Dreadnought warrior snarled, pointing at Saran. You speak treason. You defend primitives over the council that gave you life. The High Speaker's eyes narrowed, his voice cold. Yes, treason. And treason has only one punishment. Guards moved forward, their weapons ready, and Saran's heart raced. He had spoken truth, but truth always came at a price. Yet before the guards could strike, another voice rose. It was the reptilian warlord, his growl echoing across the chamber. No. He speaks what we all know. The council has lied. The council is afraid. And fear will destroy us all. His words carried the weight of an old soldier, and many delegates looked to him with respect. One by one, more voices joined, some soft, some defiant, until the chamber was filled not with chaos but with a dangerous silence. The kind of silence that comes before a storm breaks. The High Speaker looked around, his power crumbling before his eyes. His voice shook with fury. You dare stand against me? Against the council? And in that silence, no one answered. That was the answer itself. The breaking point had come. The council was no longer one voice. It was many, divided, fractured, ready to shatter completely. And once shattered, nothing could rebuild it again. Saran stood frozen, his breath sharp, his heart pounding. He knew the storm had only begun. The council might not fall today, but its foundation had already cracked beyond repair. War would come, rebellion would spread, and all because the truth had finally broken free. He thought of Earth, of the humans who had never asked for this storm, and he wondered if they knew the power of the fire they carried. For better or worse, the galaxy was changing, and nothing would ever be the same again. The council chamber was quiet now, but it was not the quiet of peace. It was the silence of a storm after the first lightning strike, the silence that comes when everyone knows the ground beneath their feet is about to break. The delegates sat stiff in their seats, some glaring at the high speaker with cold defiance, others shifting nervously as though the walls themselves were closing in. The lie had been spoken for the last time. No voice could cover it again. Earth was no longer defenseless in their minds. The truth had been spoken, and truth cannot be hidden once it has been seen. Saran stood at the edge of the chamber, his heart pounding, his hands trembling. He had spoken when fear told him to be silent. He had felt the weight of death pressing on his shoulders when the guards moved toward him, but others had stood in his defense. He was still alive, but he knew survival was not the same as safety. He looked toward the high speaker, and saw a face not of strength but of desperation. Power was slipping from the man's hands, and desperate rulers were always the most dangerous. The high speaker rose slowly, his cloak dragging across the cracked crystal floor. His eyes burned as he swept his gaze across the hall. "You think you can challenge me? You think a primitive world and the lies of frightened children can break the council? You are fools. Without this council your worlds will burn. Without this council you will eat one another alive." His voice grew louder, harsher, his anger no longer hidden. "And if you choose rebellion, then rebellion you will have. But remember this, I will not fall alone. I will take you all with me." Gasps filled the chamber, and the fear that had been buried beneath anger rose once more. The council had ruled not only with laws but with the promise of stability. Now even that promise was gone. The Chiron delegate stood, her silver skin glowing in the dim light. "You call us fools, but it is your fear that blinds you. You declared Earth weak to protect your own power. You silenced voices that carried truth. You let lies sit upon this throne until it poisoned us all. If this council burns, it will be by your hand." Others rose with her, voices joining in defiance. The reptilian warlord slammed his claw against the table, his growl shaking the hall. "We will no longer bow to lies. The galaxy will know the truth. The humans have endured what none of us could. That is not weakness. That is strength." His words struck deep, and Saran felt pride swell in his chest, though fear still lingered. The hall erupted with shouts once more, but this time the power had shifted. The high speaker's voice was not the loudest anymore. His shadow had grown smaller. Then, from the chamber doors, footsteps echoed. All eyes turned as the human ambassador stepped inside once again. He had not been invited, he had not been summoned, yet here he was, calm and steady, walking into the storm without fear. The guards hesitated but did not stop him. Perhaps even they understood that weapons were useless against words already spoken. The human stepped into the center of the hall, his eyes sweeping across the room. "You are afraid," he said simply. His voice was not loud, but every ear strained to hear. "Not of us. Not of Earth. You are afraid of what you see in yourselves when you look at us. You see how far you have fallen, how much you depend on lies, how easily fear controls you. And you hate it. You hate us because we remind you of what you lost. The will to endure. The fire to survive." The high speaker shouted, his voice cracking. "Silence! You will not speak here." But his command carried no weight. The human did not even glance at him. Instead he continued, his voice calm as stone. "You think declaring us weak will protect you. But weakness is not declared. Weakness is proven. And we have proven again and again that we will not break. Empires have burned on our soil. Predators have tried to erase us. Even our own wars should have destroyed us. But here we are. Still standing. Still breathing. Still fighting. He looked around, his gaze piercing through every delegate. Can you say the same? Can you say your people would rise if everything you built was torn down? Or would you fall and vanish, forgotten in the dust? The hall was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the High Speaker's fury faltered for a moment, his face pale beneath the fire of his rage. The human took a breath and spoke again, softer this time, almost like a whisper carried on the wind. We do not ask for your pity. We do not ask for your fear. We only ask for truth. Call us weak if you wish, but know that when the storm comes, it will not be words that decide who stands. It will be will. And in that, we are not defenseless. His words settled like heavy stones in the hearts of all who listened. They could not be denied. Saran felt his chest tighten with awe. The human had done what no one else could. He had not begged for alliance. He had not demanded respect. He had simply spoken truth, and truth was stronger than any fleet. Around the chamber, delegates lowered their heads in thought, some ashamed, some uncertain, some afraid. The unity of the council was gone. The lie that had bound them together was broken beyond repair. And in its place, a new question rose. What would rise when the old fell? The High Speaker's face twisted in fury, his last shield of authority shattering. He pointed at the human, his voice trembling with rage. If you are not defenseless, then prove it. Let the galaxy see your strength when your world burns. His threat echoed through the chamber, but it did not bring fear. It brought disgust. Delegates turned away from him, their silence louder than any shout. The High Speaker had lost. His throne was already ashes. The human ambassador looked at him for the first time, calm and steady. You are already defeated. Not by us. Not by war. By truth. And truth cannot be burned. With those words he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing like thunder in the silence. No guard stopped him. No voice called him back. He had spoken the final truth, and it had left the council broken. Saran closed his eyes, the weight of the moment pressing into him. The galaxy had changed before his eyes. The council was no longer the unshakable throne of power it had once been. Its lies had been exposed, its unity shattered. Some would leave, some would rebel, some would fight. War might come, or perhaps something new would rise in the ashes. But one thing was certain, Earth was no longer a silent world on the edge of the galaxy. Its voice had been heard. Its truth had been spoken. And the galaxy would never forget. As Saran opened his eyes and looked into the chamber filled with broken silence, he knew history had just turned a page. Not by fleets. Not by empires. But by a single world that refused to bow. By a single truth that could not be silenced. And in that truth, Saran thought, lay the future of them all.